Hey team, welcome to another episode of Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerr, and this week we're starting a new series on the show, Research Recaps with Skye Waterson. In this series, we're going to be taking a look at a single research paper and really diving into what the paper says, how it was conducted, and any practical takeaways that we can glean from it. In this first episode of the series, we're going to be looking at emotional regulation as a core symptom of ADHD. As this is a new series, we're going to be figuring out what works and what doesn't, and I'd love to hear what you all think of it. So if you have any thoughts, just head on over to hackingyouradhd.com/contact and send that over to me so that, hey, maybe we can make this a little bit better. New episodes of Research Recap will be coming out every other Friday. All right, with that said, let's get on with the show. All right, I'm really excited to have us be doing this new segment, and all the listeners, welcome to listening to this. So we've got Skye here with me, and today we're going to be talking about this paper called Evidence of Emotion Dysregulation as a Core Symptom of Adult ADHD, a Systematic Review. All right, well, can you tell us a little bit about this paper?
Yeah, so this was a really interesting paper. They wanted to really establish a little bit more whether emotional dysregulation is a core symptom of adult ADHD. And for those of you who got adult ADHD and you've experienced this, I think you guys are going, probably yes, but academia is still figuring it out. So what they wanted to do was they looked at a bunch of different papers and they talked specifically about this model, which Nig and Casey talked about back in 2015, of three neural networks that are affected in ADHD, and that this would be the basis of emotional, motivational, cognitive deficits. So frontostriatal, frontal cerebellum, and frontolimbic, which basically just, I'm pointing at the front of my head. It's kind of in there somewhere. And they were sort of going, okay, we think there's an issue with this top-down regulation and it's affecting ADHD, but what does that mean in practice? So what they did was they looked at a couple of different papers, specifically with adults, people who are over 18, which is pretty cool because adults don't always get studied.
Yeah, it's something where we see a lot, just so much research about kids with ADHD, and it's sometimes you can extrapolate, but a lot of it is, since this is developmentally based, it's being like, well, gonna get to some of these things later in life, but are you ever going to reach the same levels as a neurotypical at the same?
Exactly. Especially with emotional dysregulation, because I feel like I'd like to think the way that I emotionally react to things as an adult is not the same as I did when I was a child.
Yeah, well, when the emotions go off the rails, it tends to just keep
Yeah.
going. There's no getting back on the tracks unless you're doing some of the things that can help recenter yourself.
Oh yeah, especially with ADHD, we're so dopamine seeking. And, all stimulation is dopamine on some level. It can be hard to rein ourselves in. It's something I'm constantly working on. So what they did was they ended up finding 22 papers, which wasn't too bad. They thought it wasn't that many, but as we'll see, it's partially because they split it into a whole bunch of different sections. And they really wanted to look at 10 studies comparing emotional regulation scores in adults and controls. And they found that ADHD groups had consistently lower emotional regulation scores compared to control groups. And this was, pretty much what we expected. And they were considering, okay, it seems like emotional regulation could be a core component at this point in the paper. And they show you a little pieces of that. I thought it was really interesting, though, about the different kinds of ways that we manage our emotions. Because they specifically said that an ADHD trend is to use, and I'm looking down because I'm reading from this wonderful Remarkable, if those of you are wondering, it's to use maladaptive emotional regulation strategies, rude, and to rate low their own regulatory skills. One of the biggest ones they mentioned was suppression, which is interesting, this idea of just going like, yeah, no, we're not having those feelings. That's not happening. Have you heard of this idea of suppression? Do you think this is something that you've experienced doing?
When I was reading it, I was also thinking of terms of masking and just being like, oh, I'm not going to be reactive to these situations because I can't control myself.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because I thought about masking in this context and it really made me think, because I know in the past, I've definitely been one of those people who looks back on something and goes, that was really stressful. But at the time, I'm like, nope, this is fine. It's going to keep going. And yeah, sometimes that could lead to sort of experiencing the emotions a little bit later on, which is definitely, I mean, they put it in black and white here. One of the problems of that is you tend to experience negative issues, like rumination and all that kind of stuff longer because you're not actually working on the emotions when they happen.
That is making me think about also this idea of how well ADHDers tend to function in a crisis is because we are putting off that panic. And it
Yeah.
is something like, so later people just crash because they're like, oh, it's
Yeah.
just all hit
Yeah.
at once.
Yeah. I have to say, until I read this paper, which is one of the reasons I love and continue to read these papers, I'd never really thought about that as an ADHD thing. I think, like so many things, I'd considered it to be my own personal experience as a result of my own personal history. And looking at this, I'm like, oh, God, okay. This apparently is, a path that a lot of us go down.
And it's definitely, yeah, there's times when I've had like very stressful things going on and I'm just like, I can't focus and just put it off. And then later just being like completely unable to function.
Yeah. Which is, again, that burnout, right? The thing that we're really known for is struggling with burnout as well. So they looked at some other things too. One of the interesting things they looked at was interventions. And they only had like 3 papers to do this with. So this is very much not a meta-analysis at this point. This is just really a case study of 3 different papers. And they found one paper where they found that mindfulness training helped with ADHD symptoms, particularly inattentive symptoms, but also functional impairment and impulsivity and emotional dysregulation. And it was significant, which was interesting. They didn't talk about what mindfulness in this case looked like, but I know this is something that comes up a lot.
Well, yeah. And yeah, that is a great point that how you do mindfulness matters.
There's a lot of ways.
Yeah. And some are much more effective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And some of them are also better for certain people. I mean, I know that it's more and more becoming a conversation of if you've had these previous life experiences, this kind of mindfulness might not be for you right now. You might want to do something that is less sitting in a room with nothing going on. So there's lots of different ways to engage with mindfulness.
I'm just looking at this line here too that I think is worth the mentioning is just the greater severity of other ADHD symptoms was also correlated with greater severity of emotional dysregulation.
Yeah.
Which is totally makes sense. One thing that has always stuck out with me when thinking about emotional regulation in terms of ADHD, everything in my head is affected by my ADHD, all my thought processes. I don't see how my emotions would just be separate from that. Like, this one part of the brain doesn't have ADHD. I'm like,
can you imagine? That's actually kind of funny when you think about it like that. And this kind of comes back to this idea of hot and cold executive functioning, which we haven't talked about, but I've definitely talked about before, where if you're in an emotionally dysregulated state, your ability, your working memory, those kinds of things are now more impaired as well. So yeah, it's hard to find your keys at the best of times. It's harder to find them when you're very frustrated.
yeah. Or if you're like, I am running late, I need to get out now.
Yeah.
And my keys aren't where they're supposed to be.
100%.
And now I'm flipping out because why did I do this?
Well, they did find a non-significant paper result. And I was very impressed that they put it here because most of the time people will just ignore non-significant things. So they did find that there was not a significant it was a correlation, but it wasn't significant between treatment if we were talking about just mentalization-based interventions. That's what they talked about. And then they also reviewed another study looking at emotional dysregulation and OROS methylphenidate. And they did find that there was a significant improvement. So they were also looking at the effects of medication as well.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. Yeah, because I saw that in their discussion, sometimes medication is a factor, sometimes it's not. And that does have a big impact on, go back to that, what we're talking about, when I have more ADHD issues, I'm going to have more emotional issues. If I'm on medication, that should theoretically help with my emotional
Mm-hmm.
regulation.
Yeah, even if it's not designed to, because of this helping with the executive functioning. It is really interesting, having this conversation, you really do understand just how difficult it can be to have ADHD and just having to manage all these different pieces. I think we talk about this in such a clinical way sometimes. I'm procrastinating and I have to take this and then I won't procrastinate, or I have to do this and I won't procrastinate. But when we include emotional stuff into it as well, then we're sort of going like, man, this is really just my whole day.
And when we think about it in terms of like, this is something I've heard a lot for kids, but just as effective adults, is this. A lot of parents talk about when their kids get out of school, how that come off of school, like their kids have no more regulation left in who they are. Just, they've been masking or doing whatever they need to do all day at school. They get home, they're just like, they're mad, unable to listen to anything. And you're like, you have kind of a pool of executive resources that you can use throughout the day. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, it's really hard to manage. And so that is something I try to keep in mind when I'm dealing with my kids after. I'm like, they're not trying to be mean or do any of these things. They're just coming off of whatever was going on in their.
Yeah, 100%. It's almost like they were using suppression as an emotional regulation strategy, which is funny because they say, don't do that. And you're like, well, have you ever been to school? Have you ever been to work?
Yeah, it's like one of those things like, what are you going to do? Just, it's, yes, we want to have healthy outlets for our emotions, but not always in the moment.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And they did say something. So in the discussion, spoiler alert, they said that they don't think that they can say that ADHD is related to emotional regulation strategies. They had a lot of different feelings at this point. They kind of wanted to hedge their bets, which I understand. Academia. But they also said that, this outcome suggests that not only inattentive hyperactivity and impulsiveness, but also emotional dysregulation are core components. So there are some suggestions of this. And it does indicate another question about what does that mean for ADHD as a diagnosis at all? Like, where does it fit? A lot of the DSM, where things go, is somewhat arbitrary, if those of you who guys don't know. They kind of figured it out as they went along. And so if this became part of the new DSM, which is still not out, then it would be interesting to see if that would change where it sat in terms of the actual dysregulations at all.
Yeah. And even if it's not part of the diagnostic criteria, I think it's good to have it is something to realize is being affected.
100%.
Because there's also the point that when I am highly emotionally dysregulated, I have more.
Yep. Yeah.
It's not a one-way street there. It's going both ways. So I think it's like having that in mind when I'm going, okay, I need to just know this about myself when I am dealing with high emotions or when I am dealing with bad days, because is going to be something that's so affecting on everything I do.
100%. And it's nice to have that because often we can, we sort of separate the two types of strategies, but understanding that they're both going to be affecting you, they're both going to be affecting everything, it maybe gives you a few more tools in the tool belt, which is always good.
All right, let's sum this up. Do we have any final thoughts on this paper?
I think it was good to talk about this. I think it was good to talk about this with adults. I think it would have been nice to have a bit more of a sense of really whether they think it is connected, because there is a lot of research to suggest that it is. But I think from our own looking at this, I think we can say, yeah, more and more evidence for the connection of emotional dysregulation and ADHD.
And I guess one of the things that to just caveat, one of the reasons they did have that, hey, we're not sure, is because of all the comorbidities that are involved with ADHD. They specifically call out bipolar disorder and how that is a huge factor. If you have a comorbidity that does have emotional dysregulation, you're going to see it's going to be a huge issue. And ADHD, come to us friends.
Yeah, we have a group. It's a cluster. Hello. So you were just listening to a research recap. I'm Skye Waterson of Unconventional Organization. If you like that, there's lots more information about ADHD and support for you at unconventionalorganization.com. You can go ahead and check that out. Lots of free resources, lots of strategies. And if you want to join our programs, you can do that as well. And we'll see you there, Unconventional Organization.